we're going to move on to types of policing. There are various types of police work and the way they conduct their work. We're going to start with the community-oriented policing. And community needs police, right? Our communities need police. We need them for safety. We need them for protection. But the police also need the community. They need the community to report crimes and to cooperate in investing those crimes. So what is community-oriented policing? It is programs and strategies designed to bring police and the public closer together and create a cooperative working environment. Okay? So, what was implemented to create such an environment? Foot patrol, walking the beat, right? Law enforcement puts officers, their patrol, in the public eye. This didn't particularly bring down crime rate, but what did it do? It made the public in a community feel safer and less afraid of crime. So in order to have community-oriented policing, where police want citizens to help or participate in fighting crime, there has to be some changes, right? There has to be some changes to the roles, both the police and the community. For instance, focus resolving problems at the neighborhood level. What the questions, what are the needs of that particular neighborhood? We're not having a one-size-fits-all. If you have an urban city area versus a rural suburban area, the needs are not going to be the same, especially for fighting crime. So the first common feature is community engagement. Developing and maintaining the trust of the community is pivotal to the success of community policing. Community engagement requires a policing perspective that goes beyond the standard of law enforcement emphasis. This outlook recognizes that the value of police activities that contribute to order and well-being in the community is key. These activities, what kind of these activities would include? What would community activities include? Working with residents themselves to improve their own neighborhood conditions. Maybe providing emergency social services to any of those folks who are at risk, so they get social services involved. Conducting door-to-door visits to residents in order to increase perception of safety. And just simply walking around, walking the beat, as it's called. These types of activities serve to help develop the trust between the police and the community, and then this in turn allows the police to gain access to important information from the community, which can lead to the prevention of crimes and increase support for crime control measures and provide an avenue through which the police can develop a working relationship with the community, right? It all sounds nice and simple. Community engagement. What else does it require? Community engagement requires the active participation of members of the community. They must be actively engaged in efforts to enhance their community safety for themselves. And this requires them to be honest and upfront, forthcoming, providing information to the police, and to promptly report crimes when they occur. Citizen involvement also requires citizens to participate in activities such as youth-oriented crime prevention projects or sanction neighborhood patrols, neighborhood watch. One key element to community engagement is the return of the foot patrol officer, which we don't see much depending on where you are around. And within a community policing framework, the foot patrol officer is assigned to a designated area for an extended period of time. The more noticeable presence of a long-term officer, one in and of itself, not a changing one, a rotating one, the same one. The more noticeable presence of a long-term officer itself may encourage community response and build trust as citizens to become more comfortable with that familiar face of that local officer. So developing trust, mobilizing citizens has actually proven in many cases to be what? Difficult. Doesn't happen overnight. And to build trust, to have this effective relationship, partnership, the police must treat citizens with dignity and respect. Arrogance, rudeness, and the unnecessary or excessive use of force will diminish the willingness of community members to engage with and provide information to police. It must also be recognized that community engagement and mobilization will be easier to achieve in some neighborhoods and in others. For example, establishing trust and gaining the cooperation of citizens is often easier in middle-class communities than it is in poor communities where mistrust toward police may be more entrenched. I think the fundamental element of community policing is that police become an integrated part of the community. And the community assists in determining the priorities and goals as well as the allocation of resources. So we have the community and the police working together in determining what the issues for that neighborhood are, what is the priorities, and what do we want to happen, the goals, and how are we going to have these resources to accomplish that. They work together in determining that. And the other, I'm going to switch to, got a little long-winded there on the neighborhood orientation. And what the police also have to do in changing their role, if they're going to go be a more policing, community-oriented policing organization, they got to change management style, right? And it is, in doing this, this puts patrol in charge of his or her area, and patrol is the one that implements the needs necessary to make things happen versus some higher up chief dictating the call for all. This is how it's going to be everywhere. If you have your familiar face patrol officer making the shot, calling the shots, and working with the community, that would have to change, and that's not 100% how things happen. It comes from a chief or a higher up. So this component, there has to be doing some sort of decentralization of the administration in order to make that happen, and for building effective community partnerships. I just want to make sure I didn't miss anything here. Oh, yes. And in doing the changing in not only changing management style, so you let the patrol be the driving force or the decision maker in his or her community or area he or she is assigned to. There has to be different training for patrol. If they are trained to merely be peacekeepers and make arrests, then they're not going to be effective communicators with the community. So there's going to have to be a change in the recruitment style and the training of police officers to add additional communication skills, how to work with communities, how to problem solve, which is going to be our next area of policing. There's different skills that have to come into play. So all of those things play a role in community-oriented policing. I may have gotten a little long-winded. Obviously, what comes along with that is challenges. On paper, it all sounds good, right? In our lecture, it all sounds good. But when it comes right down to it, there are some things that really need to be hammered out or fleshed out to have a successful community-oriented policing style. And maybe when we're done going through all these types of policing, maybe it's not just one type of policing that we focus on. Maybe it's encompassing a little bit of everything. Challenges, obviously defining the specific communities, defining who does what, meaning what do community members do and what does the police do or the patrol do. As I already explained, we got to change the attitudes of the higher ups. They're the ones that call the shots. Are they going to release control to the patrol or lower police levels? Orientate the police values, where the values come from. What we've learned already in Chapter 4 and in Chapter 5, and when we move on to a little later of the views that police have and the issues that they face. And of course, what I just mentioned already, training and recruitment. So let's turn to the next type of policing, problem solving. Problem solving as a type, problem-oriented as a type of policing style. It's a style of police operations that stresses proactive problem solving rather than reactive crime fighting. Right? Traditionally, they get a call, they go take care of it, hopefully make an arrest. It's responsive versus reactive. And problem solving differs from the traditional policing, in that the proactive rather than reactive, as mentioned above, rather than having the police racing to crime scenes and gathering reports from victims and witnesses as characterized in the traditional policing component. Problem solving is based on the belief that crime and disorder can be reduced in a small geographic areas, small geographic areas, by carefully studying the characteristics of problems in that area and then applying the appropriate resources, and on the assumption that individuals make choices based on the opportunities presented by the immediate physical and social characteristics of the area. The theory behind problem-oriented policing is fairly simple. Underlying conditions create the problems. That's what the theory is. So these conditions might include the characteristics of the people involved, like the offenders, the potential victims, anybody else who's involved, the social setting in which these people interact, the physical environments, and the way the public deals with these conditions. A problem created in one of these conditions may create one or more incidents. These incidences, while stemming from a common source, may appear to be different. For example, social and physical conditions in a dilapidated apartment complex might generate burglaries, acts of vandalism, intimidation of pedestrians by rowdy teenagers, and other things, other instances, some of which come to the police attention and some that don't. They're more related to symptoms of the problem. And these things will continue as long as the problem that creates them persists. So problem solving requires the involvement of the public in identifying and prioritizing a wide array of community problems, some of which are not criminal, such as the presence of abandoned cars on neighborhood streets. That's not necessarily criminal, but it could create a problem. So the model for problem solving the acronym is SARA, S-A-R-A, follows 4 steps. Scan, analyze, respond, and assess. SARA. Scan is identifying problems and prioritize them according to community input. Analyze, study the information about offenders, victims, and crime locations. Respond, implement strategies that address the chronic character of priority problems by thinking, in quotes, outside the box of traditional police enforcement tactics and using new resources that were developed by the community to support the problem-solving efforts. And then you have to assess, evaluate the effectiveness of the strategy through assessments, self-assessments, to determine how well the plan had been carried out and what good was accomplished. So determining the underlying causes of crime and crime problems requires in-depth knowledge of the community and its issues. This is where community engagement and information sharing between the police and the public becomes particularly important, hence community type style policing. The police need to accurately listen to the concerns of the community and work together with them and identify and address problems. So if you have, as with, level of citizen engagement and the nature of the severity of community problems, that varies widely in different communities as well as in specific communities. The whole community may be plagued by a problem, or it may be confined to just one geographic area. So let's talk about a couple examples here. An apartment complex with high rate of burglaries and a high level of fear among residents. Panhandling that creates fear in a business district. Street prostitutes and the associated robbery of their patrons in specific neighborhoods. These are all similar problems and issues relative to problem-oriented policing. So these are just some examples. I think I covered everything in problem-oriented policing. I thought I had another example, but it doesn't seem that I do. If there's any question, I know these get a little involved. If there are any questions, I know you can't ask me at this particular moment, but write it down, send me an email if there's any questions on anything. So we are going to move on to the next type of policing. The final type of policing is intelligence-led policing. What is it? Well, it's the collection and analysis of information to generate an quote-unquote intelligence end product. It's designed to inform police decision making at both the tactical and the strategic level. And this was a new concept created out of Homeland Security after 9/11. It is a new concept for American police forces. It's obviously fairly new since 2001. The British have been using it for years. Gathering intelligence, the key is to share and collaborate and create strategic solutions to crime problems at various levels, but terrorism was clearly the objective at the national level. And the key is to share this information, not only amongst our own agencies here in the U.S., but to other countries as well for dealing with something on the national level. The FBI defines the intelligence-led type of policing as a proactive way of thinking in law enforcement. It acts as a business process in which agencies implement policies and practices. They focus on developing priorities built on multiple factors, including intelligence analysis, And with these priorities in mind, the personnel developed intelligent types of requirements, what type of requirements. They begin collecting information based on these following requirements: organizing intelligence, processing it, analyzing it, and then disseminating it into a final product, so to speak, like a business. And it emphasizes the intelligence-led policing emphasizes analysis and intelligence as pivotal for making to make an objective decision-making framework that makes it priority on crime hotspots. So they're looking at crime hotspots. This is what the intelligence is gathering. Crime hotspots, repeat victims, repeat offenders, and criminal groups. It facilitates crime and harm reduction, disruption and prevention through strategic and tactical management, deployment, and then enforcement. The main goal of the intelligence-led policing is to get ahead of threats and criminal behavior by proactively identifying indicators and taking action based upon knowledge versus it happening and then acting. They staying ahead of it. So when it comes to data-driven law enforcement, there's two approaches: the intelligence-led policing, and alongside of that is predictive policing. Sometimes it's separated, sometimes it's talked as one, but I'm gonna kind of distinguish a little bit here. While these approaches are not mutually exclusive, there is a slight difference. The predictive policing uses computers to analyze the big data regarding crimes in a geographical area in an attempt to anticipate where and when a crime will occur in the near future. While it doesn't go as far as identifying who's going to commit the crime, it does pinpoint hot spots to help law enforcement anticipate the approximate time of day and area of town where police might anticipate another crime. And so, armed with that information, police can be placed more strategically to either stop a crime in progress or even better prevent it from happening at all. And intelligence-led policing, slightly different. On the other hand, attempts to, and these kind of all stem from one, but they define them slightly different. The book has it all lumped as one under intelligence-led policing. But I want to distinguish. Hopefully I'm making it a little clearer by doing that. So the intelligence-led policing, on the other hand, attempts to identify potential victims and potential repeat offenders, then works in partnership with the community. Oh, there's that community-oriented thing. Works in partnership with the community to provide offenders with an opportunity to change their behavior before being arrested for a more severe crime. And according to the U.S. Department of Justice, intelligence-led policing is a collaborative law enforcement approach combining problem-solving policing, information sharing, and police accountability with enhanced intelligence operations. It's designed to guide policing activities toward high-frequency offenders, locations, and crimes to impact resource allocation decisions. And an important component of intelligence-led policing is that it encourages and arguably depends on collaboration among various agencies in the community, including not only local police, but other local law enforcement, the FBI, Homeland Security agencies, and even probation and parole officers. So, with that in mind, and I think I jumped a slide a little. I didn't flip my slide where I wanted to a little earlier. Again, I don't want to read you my slides. It's not what we're here for. But this is the condensed version of information from the book. And then I'd like to add a little bit where I think it needs to be flushed out a little bit more. So on the heels of the law enforcement working together, the National Crime Intelligence Sharing Plan established types of centers, fusion centers throughout the country to allow support for law enforcement and, to help with any major operations and for community input and support, and to assist law enforcement executives in general. So this is expanding. This is a new type of policing. Not that almost 20 years old. Almost 20 years old. So some studies have been done to determine its effectiveness. Chicago implemented to control guns, and they have seen a reduction in guns by using this type of policing work. Out west, Seattle used it to fight drug crimes, and they've seen a reduction. So there's some information that it is successful, but it would pose the question as to which type works best, or should there be a combination of these. As you can hear through the discussion, that community plays a role in all three, right? Problem solving plays a role. So it appears that not one type of policing is best, but maybe a combination of the three. And our law enforcement, our police, can't do their job without their support functions, the things that we don't particularly see as the community. We see the police out there, but there are a number of support functions within the law enforcement or the police departments that are as important as our police. And the book materials are really, really clear on this. I'm going to just hit a few of the big ones. Internal affairs. They investigate charges of misconduct or corruption against police officers. So it's their conduct on the jobs. You have people who handle the budget. It's a big budget. We've talked about the budget with regards to law enforcement. There's someone who's responsible for maintaining the records and evidence. Two different things, by the way. There's someone who will be responsible for the evidence that is collected. That is an extra, all these functions are important, but let me tell you how extremely important the person who maintains the evidence is. In order for something to be allowed in court, a piece of evidence that the police collected, let's say like the weapon used in a murder, the prosecutor has got to establish that this is the murder weapon from the scene and not some planted weapon. So it has to be secured in a very strict fashion, and anyone who touches that bag of evidence, and the only people who can touch it is the investigator or the police officer and potentially the prosecutor. But if it has to go and say be tested for fingerprints, it has to make its way to a New York lab. That has to be done with the person responsible for evidence directly taking it from point A to point B and then picking it up and bringing it back. They have to establish, it's called a chain of custody. At every hand that touched this evidence, they didn't do anything, they didn't manipulate it in any way. So that is a very important position within law enforcement. Maintaining police records, as you may be aware, police records, a good majority of them are subject to freedom of information, meaning the public has access to them and can request copies. That has to be maintained in an orderly fashion. And then, of course, the training academy. Law enforcement has to continue to train. They just don't go to the academy and they're police officers. They have to continue throughout their career. They have to stay up to date on They're shooting and investigating procedures and so forth. Some trained to be dog handlers, the special dogs that will smell out drugs and things. So, and the forensics lab. So as you can see, there's a great deal of support that goes into law enforcement. So with that, we will move on to our next topic for law enforcement, which I believe is criminal procedure.